that was imposed earlier. Delhi's Environment Minister Gopal Rai will also be chairing a high-level meeting to discuss new set of directions and reopening of primary schools. The BJP now continues to target up. MP Manoj Tiwari was seen distributing masks in Delhi city, also slammed Kejriwal over air quality in Delhi.
ज़्यादा व्हीकल्स हैं, पराली वगैरह जो जल रहा है इसकी वजह से इससे ज़्यादा ही हो रहा है। जैसे इसका पोल्यूशन कम करने के लिए जो स्टेप उठाना चाहिए वो ठीक से नहीं उठा रहे हैं।
पोल्यूशन के कारण तो गाड़ियाँ कितने चल रहे हैं दूर और ये पराली जला रहे हैं, इसी वजह से जो है ये प्रदूषण ज़्यादा फैल रहा है। सुबह जो है बड़ी काफ़ी दिक्कत हो रही है और कफ भी बन जा रहा है इससे जो है इस धुंध से जो है, और आंखों में जलन जैसी महसूस हो रहा है और ये दिक्कत ज़्यादा आ रही है।
ये 7वां वर्ष है जब मैं लगातार इस महीने में हमें मास्क बांटने की आवश्यकता पड़ती है। ये जानते हुए कि मैं पूरे दिल्ली के लोगों को मास्क नहीं बांट सकता, फिर भी मेरी कोशिश है कि लोगों को इस बात का एहसास दिलाऊं कि आप अपनी सुरक्षा इस महीने 2 महीने इस पोल्यूशन से जो दिल्ली गैस चैम्बर बनी हुई है अपने को बचा लो। मैं केवल एक लोगों में एक जन जागरण जागरूकता फैलाने की कोशिश कर रहा हूं।
AQI has improved marginally in Delhi and we are right now in the very poor category from severe, but that's some relief at least when it comes to the air pollution in Delhi city, and not just that, also the national capital region. There will be a meeting today to discuss the way forward. Some restrictions might just be lifted is what we've been given to understand. The government is going to be holding a meeting today that's going to take a call on opening of schools for primary children in Delhi city, which was closed down given the severe air pollution that Delhi was reporting for the last 10 days or so. After days of choking on unbreathable toxic air, things have improved only marginally for Delhi city. The air quality in Delhi stands at 316 today, which is in the very poor category. And there could be some lifting of restrictions expected. Stubble burning, however, continues in different parts of Punjab, UP and Haryana, something that the BJP has been highlighting continuously, going after the Aam Aadmi Party, Punjab-ruled government. Also, the Delhi government is all set to hold a high-level meeting today to discuss the air quality situation and to see if some restrictions in terms of movement of diesel vehicles and also closure of schools can be lifted. This is what is going to be discussed in the high-level meeting today, whether lifting of restrictions at this point in time is feasible or not. Time for a quick commercial break here. We continue to track the story of pollution in Delhi, NCR and elsewhere. On the other side of the break, news continues.
Armed with facts, she takes the news by its horns.
Do you think the future of these students are not hampered?
Fierce, bold and direct, setting the tone for the biggest stories. From every corner and every angle. Expect nothing but the unfiltered truth.
News first, niceties later. Watch me, Nabila Jamal, on India Today.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices.
News just coming in. Kerala governor is breathing fire on the Chief Minister. Explosive escalation in Kerala feud. Kerala governor versus Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan fight has intensified, with the governor says he's being threatened constantly. VC is being stopped from performing duty is what the governor has said.
What they are doing. Do you remember I had offered that I want to be relieved of the Chancellor's position? Why they wrote 4 letters to me, pleading with me. And finally the last letter, draft they sent to me in the Raj Bhavan, which draft will be acceptable to me. I made the amendments, no if and but, and Chief Minister's letter assuring that there will be no interference in the universities. Not only by the government, but by any source. Only then they were able to persuade me to resume the duties of Vice Chancellor. Ask them whether that letter was correct or what they are saying today is correct.
Well, the story and much more going up on our website as well. That's indiatoday.in. You can also download the India Today app. News continues on the other side. Do stay on with us. Some news just coming in, and this is from Canada, where the Hindu diaspora is heckling the Brampton mayor, asking removal of hateful banners by pro-Khalistanis. Canada's City of Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown was heckled in a temple by the Hindu community for allowing anti-India elements to conduct the Khalistan referendum. The mayor was asked by the Hindu diaspora to remove hateful banners against Hindus from all over the city that read Sikh infants burnt alive by Hindu mobs. Brown was shamed in front of 4 federal parliamentarians, 3 provisional parliamentarians and 2 city councillors. Liberal MP Chandra Arya appealed to the audience to cool down and said that we do have strong differences, but Mr. Brown is our guest in the temple. Listening to what happened there.
Please, Mr. Arya, you are not aware of this sign. I am aware of it. Did you call sitting? Please. Hindu heritage is being turned into a Hindu parliament. That should not be allowed. In one city, just in front of this temple. Can you please celebrating? Please, Namaskar. Please. Hello, excuse me. Please be seated, please. This is not the Hindu way. He is answering. He is our guest. Please. This is a temple. Please.
A foreign affairs editor is getting us more details on that story. Geeta, Brampton, in fact, has been news not the first time for all of these wrong reasons in terms of supporting pro-Khalistani supporters, allowing these protests on its streets. This time again, there's a big showdown. Tell us what really happened there.
Well, that's right. Brampton, like you very rightly said, has been a city which has seen a lot of people from the Sikh community who are Khalistani supporters, and has been a place where that so-called Khalistani referendum was conducted. The Indian side had raised objections to anti-India movements being allowed on Canadian soil. But the mayor, who has a huge support base in terms of voter base, certainly has not taken up the matter as strictly as India would have liked. And the Indian community over there, particularly the Hindu community from the Indian side, were rather upset about these Khalistani banners, and that's why some of the individuals started protesting that those banners be removed. Now, we do know that there is no action that has been taken, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that they cite, free speech and expression. But India has been taking up this matter for a while now, where they have been saying that it cannot be secessionist and anti-India in any way. Having said that, the Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Arvind Kejriwal had said about the referendum that these separatist groups have been the issue of these separatist groups has been taken up with the Canadian High Commission, and India is now taking up the matter with Canadian authorities on a regular basis.
Geeta, be with us. I'm going to come back to you for more on that, and we're getting you the details of the truth behind Leicester violence, which is now out in the open. As per UK think tank Henry Jackson Society, there is no proof of involvement of Hindutva RSS extremism behind the violence that was seen a few weeks ago. Further, the report states a fake narrative was peddled to malign Hindus. Remember, clashes broke out between two communities in Leicester in the aftermath of the India versus Pakistan match in the ICC T20 World Cup. As per the think tank report, the mastermind behind the violence have terror links, and they spread fake news to incite violence and stir up tensions. Geeta, this was not spontaneous in that sense, is very evident from this report, isn't it? But what are the investigations into this criminal matter indicating? This is a think tank, of course.
Well, we don't have details, Sneha, of the investigation so far, but yes, the fact that this is a place where we've seen a lot of support for people of the Sikh faith, which is all right, but there are certain elements over there who...
Okay. Right, we'll in fact continue to keep a very close eye on that story as well. For the moment, it's time for some news which has just come in at this point in time. Let's go straight to that. Questions are being raised on whether there is another Chinese abduction. 2 Arunachal youth have gone missing from China border. Youth missing for over 2.5 months now. Family has been sending out SOS to Rajnath Singh, the defense minister. The youth went looking for traditional medicine in the forest and have now gone missing. BJP MLA says that rescue operations are underway by the army, is what we've been given to understand.
हम लोग का ये पहले कभी ऐसे नहीं होता है, हमने ये पहले बार है। तो कहीं वो रास्ता भटकते चलते जो है कहीं वो चाइना के उस ज़मीन तरफ चला गया तो वो चाइना के कब्जा में चला गया। ऐसे हम लोग को पूरा शक है। मैंने
हमको पहले से खबर हुआ था, CM DCM से भी मैंने बात कर लिया। अभी मैं हम लोग का मंत्री जो राजनाथ सिंह सर है उनको भी मैंने बात किया। तो जैसे LOC अगर क्लोज हो गया होने से उन लोग को भी वहाँ से सरकार से बात करके हम लोग बात करेगा। तब तक आप लोग कल भी ढूंढते रहिए, हम लोग को ऐसा बताया उन लोगों ने।
Well, it is D-Day for Jharkhand Chief Minister Hemant Soren in connection to the illegal allotment of mining lease case and other grave charges against him. The Supreme Court will today pronounce its verdict on the plea filed by the JMM chief against Jharkhand High Court order, which held maintainable the PILs filed against Chief Minister seeking ED and CBI probe in connection to the issuance of mining lease and illegal investment in shell companies. In the previous hearing, the apex court had stayed the High Court order, stating that PILs were not backed with enough evidence. Meanwhile, Chief Minister Soren has lashed out to the centre, accusing them of targeting their political rivals.
भारत सरकार से गुहार करते हैं कि यहाँ के गरीबों को राहत देने के लिए हमें आर्थिक मदद दो, लेकिन कोई आर्थिक मदद नहीं करता। रात का 1,36,000 करोड़ रुपया का मांग हमने भारत सरकार से किया, पैसा देना तो छोड़ दूर, CBI ED को हमारे सामने भेज दिया।
In fact, we are waiting for the EWS category quota verdict just any moment from the court is what we've been given to understand. That verdict is going to be out any time now. We'll be getting in details on the EWS quota verdict from the apex court in any moment now is what we've been given to understand. This verdict is going to be from the apex court on the validity of the EWS quota, which is actually the 103rd Constitution Amendment. This is crucial in terms of allotment of reservation, about 10% to people belonging to the economically weaker sections from unreserved categories in education institutions and government jobs. The verdict is expected any time now. It is a 5-judge constitution bench of Chief Justice U.U. Lalit and Justices Dinesh Maheshwari, S. Ravindra Bhatt, Trivedi and Pardiwala, announcing its verdict on 3 questions framed by it regarding the validity of quota 10% reservation for the economically weaker sections of the society. The issue also is going to be on whether reservation based on economic criteria is permitted by the Constitution and whether it will go against its basic structure if allowed. It assumes significance as the Constitution does not talk about the concept of preferential treatment on the basis of persons' economic status. The other issue is whether the amendment can be seen as a breach to the basic structure of the Constitution in excluding socially and educationally backward classes, other backward classes, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes from the scope of the EWS category or reservation. The first opinion is being read out. The court is saying we'll see if 50% quota is breached or not. Remember, the petitioners in this matter had contended that economic criteria could not be the basis for granting reservation and pleaded the court to declare the amendment as unconstitutional. They said granting quota to the forward caste is a fraud on the Constitution. Live streaming the verdict as is being played out in the Supreme Court right now.
From getting the benefit of reservation as economically weaker sectors, being in the nature of balancing the requirements of non-discrimination and compensatory discrimination, does not violate equality code and does not in any manner cause damage to the basic structure of the Constitution of India. C. Reservation for economically weaker sections of citizens up to 10% in addition to the existing reservations does not result in violation of any essential feature of the Constitution of India and does not cause any damage to the basic structure of the Constitution of India on account of breach of the ceiling limit of 50% because that's...
Anisha is getting us more details on that story. It's crucial from several aspects on whether this reservation by itself, Anisha, is going to be in contravention to the Constitution, is going to be against the Constitution.
Well, yes, Neha, this is a very, very important verdict for India as of right now, because this is what will determine the shape and form of reservations in the country going forward. Now, there are 4 opinions that are being read out by the Supreme Court. It's a 5-judge bench verdict. And at the moment, Justice Dinesh Maheshwari is reading out his opinion that he's giving on behalf of himself and Chief Justice of India, UU Lalit. Now, we need to remember that there are multiple issues on which the Supreme Court is giving its opinions. It is a question of whether a 50% quota can be exceeded as far as reservation is concerned, whether inclusion of only economic criteria for reservations is constitutionally valid or not, whether the government can impose reservation criteria in this form on educational institutions which are not government funded, because this, remember, this 103rd amendment had very clearly said that this will apply to all educational institutions except minority educational institutions. So all of these are issues that have to be considered by the court. Justice Maheshwari, of course, in his verdict has said that the reservation is an instrument of affirmative action. But I will repeat again, this is the opinion being given on behalf of Justice Maheshwari and Justice UU Lalit, and we are still waiting to get clarity on what the final verdict of the 5-judge bench is going to be, because there are 4 opinions that have to be given, and the Chief Justice, while introducing the opinions, has not said which is the majority verdict.
You know, also take us to the position of the government in all of this, because the counter from the petitioners, essentially, Anisha, has been that economic criteria could not be the basis for granting reservation. What has the government said in this aspect?
Well, Sneha, the government has been saying that this reservation should be held valid, because this is something that is done for the sake of social welfare, because of the fact that a large part of the population is living under poverty line. And I'm just getting to know my colleague Srishti Ojha is inside the Supreme Court getting us the minute-by-minute updates, even as we are also listening to the live stream of the Constitution bench verdict. Justice Dinesh Maheshwari and Justice Bela Trivedi have given concurring opinions, which means that at least 2 judges on the bench have said that the EWS reservation is valid. But we'll have to wait and see what the other opinions are there. The questions, or whether there are opinions that are differing on different questions of the law. But at the moment, Justice Dinesh Maheshwari and Justice Bela Trivedi, 2 of the judges, have given concurring opinions saying that the EWS quota law is in fact correct, that this is something that is for that is requirement for affirmative action. But what Justice Maheshwari also said, that this amendment cannot be said to breach the basic structure for excluding the socially and economically backward classes, because this is justified, and this is something that if this is something that is the majority opinion of the court, then this will be a big win for the government, because they have been trying to say that a reservation only on economic criteria does not violate the rights of SC, ST, OBCs, which is what a major issue that had been flagged in this particular set of arguments, in this particular sets of petitions was. And we are still waiting to hear from the other 2 judges as well on the bench. So Justice Bela Trivedi and Justice Maheshwari have given concurring judgment. So we'll have to see how exactly this is going to work out. What are the contours of the decision that have to be taken? Because remember, there are multiple questions of law involved. What happens with EWS quota, whether SEBCs can be included or not, whether this can be imposed on private educational institutions and private jobs as well. These are 3 separate questions that the judges have to answer. And we are listening to Justice Bela Trivedi. We're listening to Justice Bela Trivedi reading out her opinion as we speak. And she has, while she's saying that she's agreeing with the principle, the exclusion of SEBCs, that is SC, ST, OBC criteria, is something that she does not believe she can agree with. So, as I said, very nuanced, very complicated judgment coming from the Supreme Court today. We will have to hear every line, every sentence that comes from the Honorable Supreme Court. Because as we speak, and I'm going to ask my cameraman Ankit to try and zoom in and show you, and we are in fact at the moment trying to hear what the court is saying. Justice Bela Trivedi, in her opinion, is talking about whether the procedure to be followed, whether the decision that was taken by the Parliament was correct or not, and at the moment we will, as I said, we'll have to wait and see every line, every nuance of this order, because different questions may be answered differently by the different judges. Justice Trivedi has said that this cannot be struck down as discriminatory if the state can justify it. The benefit under EWS is not discriminatory. That is what the Justice Bela Trivedi is saying, because this is an issue of equal justice. And Justice Bela Trivedi, as I said, has upheld the amendment, has concurred with Justice Dinesh Maheshwari's verdict. And so therefore, it seems at this stage, of course, Neha, that at least 3 judges of the 5-judge bench have said that the EWS quota is valid. But as I said, we'll have to wait and see for the Chief Justice to read out the conclusion of this entire verdict. If there are any dissenting opinions, if there is any separate opinion being given by any person so far, but for now, the verdict of Justice Maheshwari and Justice Trivedi have both upheld this EWS quota, which means that this is a major win for the government of India, which has been trying to justify this quota. They've been trying to say that there was nothing wrong with excluding SC, ST, OBCs from this extra 10% quota criteria, that there is this kind of a verdict is not discriminatory, this kind of exclusion is not discriminatory, because we're trying to bring in some sort of an affirmative action, particularly for persons who are living below poverty line. So at the moment, what we are seeing is that at least 2 judges have concurred on this. But Justice Trivedi, as we speak, is also speaking.
Sure, just go through the hearing in the court right now as we speak, and I'll just read out for our viewers what has been said in court. Remember, it is 2 Supreme Court judges upholding the 10% quota right now, with Justice Maheshwari saying the quota is on for all classes. We're getting in details from the court, with Justice Maheshwari saying that TEWS reservation and the 103rd Amendment does not violate the basic structure. Justice Trivedi is concurring. Can't be struck down as discriminatory. It is not discriminatory if the state can justify it. And by state, they mean the government, who in fact in this case have put forth their argument saying that they are in favor of 10% quota or reservation in education institutions for the economically weaker sections of the society. The amendment required to be taken as affirmative action for advancement of EWS citizens. Take them as different class, and that is justifiable. Unequals can't be treated equally. SEBC form separate categories, can't be treated at par with unreserved category. Benefit under EWS can't be said to be discriminatory, can't be called travesty if equal justice is sought to be submitted by the petitioners. I'm going to try and go back to Anisha Mathur for more on that story as she is listening in to the live streaming from the Supreme Court right now, which we've put out for our viewers as well. But Anisha is listening to that. Anisha, what more can you tell us? What are the last updates?
Sneha, now we can say that Justice Pardiwala is also reading out his verdict, and he is also concurring. So now we have a clear verdict from the Supreme Court. 3 judges have concurred with saying that the 103rd Amendment can be upheld. The Justice Pardiwala, as we speak, is talking about what his lines of argument, what his line of reasoning on this issue is. He's talking about the fact that reservation is for the upliftment of the community, that reservation is not the end end of social justice, but it is a means to achieve social justice. And therefore, Justice Trivedi, Justice Maheshwari and Justice Pardiwala have all said that the time span of reservation is also something that needs to be looked at. Justice Trivedi, in fact, and this is a very important point read out by Justice Bela Trivedi in her opinion on this particular issue, that age-old caste system in India was responsible for reservation system, for historical justice, injustice done to backward classes, and to give them the level playing field, and that a timeline can be provided to bring egalitarian, classless and casteless society. And this is a hope and expectation that is being expressed by Justice Trivedi. Justice Pardiwala, of course, concurring with this. So we have a clear verdict coming in from the Supreme Court. It is a big win for the government of India that the Supreme Court is saying that the EWS reservation can be upheld. It is not invalid as far as the Constitution is concerned, but the judges have given certain comments, certain observations regarding the extent to which you can continue with reservations. The judges are raising this issue of caution that how far can these reservations continue, that we need to work towards a more egalitarian society, that this is something that this is a means, we can quote, and my colleague Srishti Ojha is inside giving us the minute-by-minute updates as well, and I'm also connected to the Supreme Court hearing as we speak, and we're here listening to the verdicts being read out. And
story that we're getting at this hour, and we're going across to that where the Supreme Court is upholding the EWS reservation, which is a reservation 10% quota in education institutes for the economically weaker sections of the society. The story is being brought to you, viewers, by Anisha Mathur, also Shrishti, my colleague who's inside the court. Nalini Sharma also tracking all of those details very closely. With Justice Pardiwala just saying that while upholding validity, I've thought fit to observe reservation is not end, but means to secure social justice. So a beginning has been made in terms of assuring quota for the economically weaker sections of the society. I'm going to go straight back to Anisha Mathur for what has been said by each of these judges while upholding 10% quota for poor. Anisha.
Well, yes, Neha, if you look at what has been read out so far, and as we speak, Justice Bhatt is now reading out his part of the opinion. It is very clear that the Supreme Court is upholding the EWS reservation. It is a big win for the government. It is a big change for our country, as the Supreme Court has said that it is valid to have a purely economic criteria for reservation. But what is also interesting to note is that the judges have also made certain observations, certain hopes and opinions about the reservation system itself. What Justice Pardiwala in particular has said that it is necessary to take into a review the method of identification and determination of backward classes. Reservations should not be allowed to become a vested interest, and this is a very important point that has been made by Justice Pardiwala. Justice Bela Trivedi also has pointed out that the time span for reservation is something that needs to be looked into, that you cannot keep to the idea that the age-old caste system is the only was responsible for the reservation system itself, that historical injustice is the reason for creating a level playing field. Anglo-Indian reservation, she's raised an opinion about that. Anglo-Indian reservation has ceased to exist through the 104th Amendment, and there could be a similar timeline provided for how long reservations can continue. So this means that the Supreme Court, while upholding this EWS reservation criteria, is also expressing the hope that reservation will not be something that goes on indefinitely. But at the moment, they have said that the EWS reservation cannot be struck down on the basis of constitutional principles. What is also important to note is that Justice Dinesh Maheshwari, in the opinion that he had read out, had said that this amendment does not breach the basic structure for excluding the socially and economically backward sections. And as we've been discussing, Sneha, we are going to have to read every nuance, every sentence of this judgment in detail and analyze this threadbare to find out exactly what this means. Of course, the basic news point at this moment and the basic point for the country right now is that the EWS quota has been upheld, that the government's argument that this is something for affirmative action, this is something for to uplift the poor population of the country, to ensure that everybody gets the equal opportunity to access jobs and education.
Justice Ravindra Bhatt dissenting there, and while dissenting, Justice Bhatt has said, I disagree with question 3. This court has for first time in 7 decades sanctioned a discriminatory principle. Anisha, take us to the details of what has been said by the dissenting judge here, and what does this really mean for the judgment per se? Does it mean anything at all?
Well, Sneha, at the moment, since it is a 4-1 verdict, which means that Chief Justice U.U. Lalit, Justice Dinesh Maheshwari, Justice Bela Trivedi and Justice Pardiwala have all concurred. So the EWS quota will remain upheld. This means that it's a big win for the central government as the EWS quota will continue. What Justice Ravindra Bhatt has said in his dissent, however, is also an important point for the country to consider as a principle when we are looking at the reservation system as such. And this is something that the other judges have also pointed out, whether there is something of a discriminatory principle. And I'm reading the update that my colleague Srishti Ojha has sent from inside the courtroom. Justice Bhatt in his dissent has made a very important point. This is the first time in 7 decades that the court is sanctioning a discriminatory principle, that language of exclusion undermines the basic structure, which is something that an argument was made, that why is it that even if you are creating an EWS criteria, why is it that SC, ST, OBCs are being kept out of this 10% extra reservation that is being given right now to the economically backward sections? And therefore, Justice Bhatt is dissenting, but he is the lone dissent on the bench, which means that out of this 5-judge bench, 4:1, EWS quota has been upheld. The Supreme Court has given its stamp of approval to the 103rd Amendment, which means that state governments and at the central level, educational institutions and jobs will now have a 10% quota for economically backward sections, economically weaker sections. Now remember, the central government in its response to the court had very clearly said that there is a criteria, income criteria of 8 lakhs as a cutoff. So if a family's annual income is less than 8 lakh rupees, only then will they be able to access this 10% reservation in education and in government jobs. But the court has also made certain observations regarding the timeline and the extent to which reservations can be guaranteed. The court has expressed hope that there could be a classless, casteless society created in India at some point, and has questioned how long a timeline for reservations can be given. However, Justice Bhatt, and we are still, he has just, as we are speaking right now, Sneha, Justice Bhatt has just concluded his reading out his opinion, and he has said that the government is describing these as benefits, but it cannot be understood as a free pass for SC, ST, OBCs. This is a reparative mechanism, according to him, to have a level playing field, and which is why, according to Justice Bhatt, the exclusion of SC, ST, OBCs from this 10% extra EWS quota violates basic structure because it discriminates the basic code of equality that is there in Article 14, 15 and 16. So very, very important observations are being made even in this dissenting verdict that has come out from Justice Bhatt here. But it is very clear that the Supreme Court is upholding the EWS criteria for reservations for economically backward sections, and this is a very, very important principle that is going to affect reservation system in India for the next several years, in fact even decades in now, because this will change how reservations are viewed in the country per se. Sneha.
Yes, Anisha, you rightly mentioned that, but you've also said that Justice Pardiwala has added some caveats as well, talking about the fact that this can't essentially be endless in a way that the idea for reservation was the idea of Dr. Ambedkar was to bring reservation for 10 years, but it has continued. Reservation shouldn't be allowed to become a vested interest, an important say from Justice Pardiwala today.
Well, yes, Neha, this is, as I said, we will have to see all the observations being made by the Supreme Court, because even as this EWS reservation has been upheld, the court has inserted some words of caution, some words of hope, some opinions from the judges about how this reservation system works. As you just quoted, Justice Pardiwala has said that the idea by Dr. Ambedkar was to bring reservation for 10 years, but it has continued so far, even 75 years after independence, and the reservation should not be allowed to become a vested interest. And that is a very, very important point that also Justice Trivedi had made, that 75 years after independence, we're still reviewing this entire situation, that that unequals cannot be treated equally, that benefits, however, Justice Trivedi has said that benefits under EWS are not discriminatory. But at the same time, both judges have questioned the issue of whether a timeline can be provided under Article 15 to create some sort of better egalitarian society. So this question of timelines is something that both these judges have raised in their concurring opinions on this EWS quota issue. And we'll have to, as I said, wait and see how this nuance of the debate has worked out in the court, because whether or not these observations directly affect policy, because this is not something that is a direction, these are observations where the court is saying that there could or should be some sort of a timeline, there needs to be a review, that the mechanisms by which these criteria are identified, and this is also very, very important, that the mechanism of identification also needs a review. And this is something that Justice Pardiwala has pointed out in his opinion, that while he is upholding the EWS reservation as a principle, as a law, these criteria need to be considered and reviewed. So whether the government will then look at all of these cautions, look at all of these caveats that the Supreme Court judges are pointing out, that is now going to shape the rest of the debate around this entire system of reservations in our country. So this is also going to be very important to see what the judges are really saying about all of this. Back to you.
Important points by the dissenting judge, Justice Bhatt, who's saying that their exclusion discriminates equality code and violates the basic structure. This can't be understood as a free pass, but as a reparative mechanism to have a level playing field. This is an important point that, Anisha, is being made by the dissenting judge here, Justice Bhatt. Anisha, in fact, I was talking to you about the opinion of the dissenting judge here, who says that this can't be considered as a free pass, but as a mechanism really to have level playing field.
Well, yes, the dissenting judge, and as we speak, Justice Bhatt is still reading out his opinion on the other questions of law. Now, remember, what Justice Bhatt has done is that he's given an opinion on all three questions of law, which is regarding whether the amendment is constitutionally valid or not, whether the imposition of such a provision in private educational institutions was valid or not, and whether this is per se discriminatory. Now, what Justice Bhatt has said is, while this is a discriminatory provision, because this amendment practices something that is constitutionally prohibited, and I'm quoting the Justice Bhatt's opinion here, that my colleague Srishi is telling us from inside the court, that this amendment practices constitutionally prohibited form of discrimination because it has, and Justice Bhatt has quoted that the Sinha Commission that was set up to examine the condition of economically backward persons in the country in July 2010 had given a detailed report which says that out of the EWS sections, 37% are SCs, 14% are OBCs and 5% are of general category, which means that according to Justice Bhatt and the Sinha Commission report, the bulk of economically weaker sections also belong to these backward categories, which are the socially and economically backward categories of SC, STs and OBCs, which is why Justice Bhatt is saying that what is being described as a benefit is not a free pass, that this kind of an exclusion of these categories violates the code of equality and the basic principles under the Constitution. However, he is also saying that reservation in private institution is not per se violative. And this, and I will reiterate this once again, Sneha, that because of all of these three questions that have been considered by the court, the contours of the reservation policy going forward are also going to be greatly affected, because here even Justice Bhatt, even though he's dissenting, even though he's saying that he does not agree with the EWS, the way the EWS quota has been created and the fact that SC, ST, OBCs have been excluded from this, he, however, has said that reservations in private institutions are not per se violative, that these institutions constitute a material resource of the community and the state has a vital interest. So this also means that with all 5 judges concurring on the principle of state being able to include reservations even in private institutions, this will also affect the contours of how reservation in education and reservation in jobs is going to go on moving forward, because this is going to be an important point of contention by the private schools, etc., who have been questioning whether this economically weaker section criteria is something that can be imposed. Because remember, the EWS category in school admissions is already there under the Article 21, the right to education. But here, apart from that RTE, here once again this 10% EWS criteria for reserved seats is also something that is now going to impact the education system in the country. And we'll have to see what the other judges have also said about this particular issue, because all 5 judges have concurred on this one point, that 50% the institutions, educational institutions, are a material resource of the community. And I'm quoting Justice Bhatt here, who has, while he has given a dissenting opinion for the general principle, has still agreed that reservation in education can be done even for private institutions. So now what we are seeing here today is that the EWS quota for the general category for socially forward but economically backward persons has been upheld by the Supreme Court, which is saying that the reservation so far has been only for historically oppressed communities, that are the SC, ST, OBC, but that also cannot go on indefinitely. That reservation per se cannot go on indefinitely is something that the Supreme Court judges have observed. So now we'll have to see how this verdict is going to affect going forward the reservation policy in the country. What happens here now, because remember, now that this policy has been upheld, it is now for the states and the central government to notify the rules by which these reservations will be implemented in the educational institutions and in the government jobs, etc. So a lot of things now hinge on how this entire system is being looked at by the government, by the courts, and what kind of issues are considered when the state governments and the central government is going to be framing the contours of the actual rules of the policy for implementation. So a lot of these points that we're talking about, Sneha, and my colleague Srishti has just sent us another update that the 50% limit breach was the principal ground of attack. And at least Justice Bhatt has said that the Tamil Nadu backward class amendment was held to be violative earlier, and the view of this bench that the creation of another class over and above has a direct bearing on the challenge in that proceeding, which means that the Tamil Nadu Act that was struck down, that is also under consideration by the court, is also going to be affected by this particular verdict of the Supreme Court. And this is something that Justice Bhatt has pointed out in his opinion that is still being read out by the Supreme Court, in the Supreme Court by the bench right now. And I'm going to request my cameraman Ankit if he can zoom in and show you the 5 judges are still sitting together. The bench is still sitting there, and Justice Bhatt is still currently reading out his opinion. I'm not sure if Ankit is going to be able to show you the visuals from the ongoing hearing, which is also being live streamed by the Supreme Court. So if anybody, any of our viewers wants to hear what Justice Bhatt is saying, they can also watch the proceeding. And the visual is, of course, we're also showing the visuals on our screens to our viewers right now. The Justice Bhatt is still reading out his opinion on what, on all of these contours, all of these nuances. But it is a very, very clear verdict from the Apex Court that the EWS quota has been upheld. 10% extra reservation for economically weaker sections from the general category has been upheld by the Supreme Court. And now the cautions and the observations of the Supreme Court should serve as some sort of guiding principles about the debate that is going to now start in the country regarding the future of the reservation policy, how this reservation is going to be framed, in what contours. Because as we've been discussing, at least 3 judges have raised the issue of how long can reservations really last. What Dr. Ambedkar had wanted was reservations for 10 years.
Yes.
But the reservations for SC, ST, OBCs are going on even till now. Justice Bhatt, I beg your pardon, Justice Trivedi also pointed out that this cannot be become a vested interest, that it has been 75 years since independence. Justice Pardiwala has also said that the principles by which the identification of persons for reservation is conducted also have to be reviewed periodically. This is not something that can go on continuously.
Yes, but I want to ask you, you know, Anisha, this is an observation that has been made by Justice Pardiwala also, that you rightly pointed out, that the idea was to bring reservation for 10 years, but that has continued. Also saying it shouldn't become allowed to become vested interest. But these are oral observations. If they find a place under written order, what is the legal implication of it? If these observations do not find a place in the written order in that sense, just clarify this for us. How does it work then?
I beg your pardon, Sneha, could you please repeat that?
You know what I was asking you was that Justice Pardiwala has spoken about the fact that the idea of reservation was to have it for 10 years or so, but it has continued. Is there any legal sanctity to this observation that has been made, in the sense that when rules are drafted and formed, then is this something that the government is going to consider in terms of the period for which reservation can be granted? Or is this going to be endless reservation like we've seen since 1952?
Well, Sneha, that is something that the government only can answer, because as I said, these are observations, these are cautions, these are caveats being given as opinions by the Supreme Court judges that this kind of endless reservation cannot continue. Now, whether or not the government actually accepts that line of argument, whether the government actually create some sort of a timeline, is something that only and only the government can answer. What we can, however, discuss right now is the fact that Chief Justice of India, UU Lalit, has agreed with Justice Bhatt's opinion. This is not a 4-1 verdict, it's a 3-2 verdict. Justice Maheshwari, Justice Trivedi and Justice Pardiwala have upheld the EWS reservation, while Justice Lalit and Justice Bhatt have said that this reservation is constitutionally invalid because it is discriminatory. So by a 3-2 verdict, this judgment has allowed the 103rd amendment to continue. It's a 3-2 judgment where the judgment by the majority is by Justices Dinesh Maheshwari, Justice Trivedi and Justice J.B. Pardiwala. And this is a very important point, because as we've been discussing, and to continue to answer your question, Sneha, the observations that have been made by the judges today, and as we've been discussing this for the last few minutes, they the legal sanctity as such, the legal force of these observations is only to shape the debate in general, whether the government actually follows this suggestion of having some sort of a timeline, whether this government actually looks at an overhaul or a review of the system by which identification of backward groups or groups which need this kind of help is something that we'll have to wait and see. But at the moment, this quota has been upheld by the Supreme Court, and these observations, and very, very crucial observations by all three judges, even the ones who have upheld this quota, have been that in reservation is not a vested interest. There has to be some sort of a timeline. There has to be some sort of a review by which identification of these communities and reservation of the persons who are entitled to these benefits is concerned. It is also a caution that has been given by by the two dissenting judges, which is Justice Bhatt and Chief Justice UU Lalit, that the exclusion of SC/ST and OBCs from this EWS quota is discriminatory. So all of this is something that in the next few days and weeks we will see shaping the debate around this entire issue of reservation policy in the country. So now we are seeing that the Chief Justice and Justice Bhatt have concurred with each other, while the three other judges, Justice Trivedi, Justice Pardiwala,
be with me. I'm just going to come back to you for more on that. In fact, Rajiv Gandhi, spokesperson of the DMK, is also now joining us. Mr. Gandhi, the court has said today, particularly the dissenting judge, that the 50% limit breach was principal ground of attack in Tamil Nadu backward class amendment was held to be violative. In that context, what is your view on what has been said by the court today in terms of upholding reservation for the economically weaker sections of the society?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, everybody. The judgment is a black day for social justice movement. The judgments are against in Article 15 and 16. Constitutionally very clear stay is only for reservation in socially educated people. But BJP government is voluntary country to economic difficult section. The judgment is against social justice and against basics of constitutional. DMK held on a review or revision petitions filed in more than Supreme Court. But today is judgment law and confirmed the law of Parliament. So DMK and social justice parties only for based on legally and review petition against any futurely in constitutional amendment and any other bill in passed in Parliament. But today is a black day for social justice, black day for Indian constitutional based on reservation.
Yes, the court in fact has also said, Justice Pardiwala to be precise, that reservation was for 10 years is what B.R. Ambedkar had wanted, but this continues. So these are caveats that have been given out by court. Do you feel that there will be time-bound reservation given by the examples of the past?
No, again, Justice most probably court on Dr. B.R. Ambedkar authority. But Ambedkar was very clear, only for 15 years in limited reservation constitution only. No other in equality for justice and employment. No more reading. So even though it's in 1951, Ambedkar says that they found that born unconstitutional, yes, Ambedkar is born. Ambedkar is held on in the resigned for law minister post. Ambedkar, in the world, law minister is matching of father of constitutional. In the verdict in parliamentary call, I am coming from born on constitutional. Any justice that speech?
Be with us, Mr. Gandhi. I'm also going to bring in Kovai Satyam of the AIADMK. Kovai Satyam, the DMK says that this is a black day with the court upholding reservation for the economic weaker sections of the society. What is the AIADMK's position?
So this controversy is raked up for political benefits and mileages, and primary member is DMK. While they were the opposition, they were saying that this EWS will be implemented at any cost, whereas the discretion was with the states. Tamil Nadu, having the highest reservation of 69%, made it very clear that EWS shall not be implemented by taking out the existing reservation system. So what needs is more transparency and clarity. But what other political parties are doing is trying to take this as a reason to do some vote bank politics.
How would you like to respond, Mr. Gandhi? All right, we'll try and connect with the DMK's Rajiv Gandhi also. I'm thanking Kovai Satyam for his views on that big story that we are tracking with the court essentially. And we're seeing that play out politically as well. DMK says this is a black day essentially. The AIA-DMK is accusing the DMK is doing politics on this entire matter. It's an ongoing war with a demand for reservation. 10% of the economically weaker sections must, in fact, or 10% reservation must be granted to the economically weaker sections of the society, and that is the verdict that has been upheld by the Supreme Court of India today. Kovai Satyam continues to be with us. Kovai Satyam, the DMK has linked this to the politics of the centre. What do you have to say, given that, in a sense, it's a victory for the government with this nod from the court today? Anisha Mathur continues to be with us. Anisha, expectedly, we're already hearing from DMK and the AIDMK, and politics is breaking out on this very sensitive issue of reservations, isn't it?
Well, it is a verdict that is going to create a lot of political upheavals, a lot of political waves in the country. Sneha, we've been seeing this kind of questions being raised about the reservation policy, about the quotas by various political parties in the last several months since the 103rd Amendment was passed by the Parliament. Now, what we need to look at, however, is the impact of this verdict on the state politics as well, because what we do know is that in some states, particularly in Tamil Nadu, the population figures, if you look at the population of OBCs or SCs is significantly more than the population of OBCs or SC, STs in some other states.
But Anisha, I'm coming back to you for more on that. And Anisha, I'd like you to ask a few questions also, if you can hear me, to Senior Advocate Shekhar Napade. First of all, sir, thank you for your time. You were, of course, representing the Tamil Nadu government on this entire matter. Your take on the Supreme Court of India upholding the pro-poor quota verdict today?
As far as the political implications are concerned, I don't think I'm competent to comment on that.
No, I'm asking you about your take on what the court has said in terms of upholding the 10% reservation.
According to me, the majority judgment runs counter to the ratio of basic structure doctrine laid down in Kejriwal Bharati's case. The reason is that equality is held to be a part of the basic structure. And the reservation provisions have been upheld by the Apex Court on number of occasions only on the ground that reservation for scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, OBC, etc. is a part of equality. Now, as far as the impugned amendment is concerned, it excludes scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, and the OBC, and which means that this reservation is for the upper caste, the upper layers of the social structure, and therefore, in my view, it does not conform to the principle of equality laid down in Kejriwal Bharati's case. Therefore, the judgment is contrary to all settled notions of constitutional jurisprudence laid down by the Apex Court from time to time. That's all I have to say, madam.
Okay. You know, I also want to ask you a question, and this, of course, has got to do with the legal aspect of what has been said by Justice Pardiwala and court just now. And it's an observation. What could be the legal ramifications of it? Please do explain to us. Justice Pardiwala has said in court that reservation at the time of conceptualization also, decades ago, was for 10 years as was envisaged by B.R. Ambedkar. And that clearly has not happened because it's continued for years together now. Does this observation have any bearing on what the government is going to do next at all?
As far as these aspects are concerned,
okay.
At this stage, I don't think I can comment on that because until I read the full text of the judgment, it's not proper on my part to give my response. Whatever that I wanted to say, I have put it already. At this stage, I can't say anything more because the full text of the judgment is yet to be read by me.
Understood. Understood. I'm thanking you. Thanking you. Yes, all right. Shekhar Napade, he was representing the Tamil Nadu government, and essentially the point that he's made, Anisha, is that this is excluding, or rather, this is reservation for the so-called upper caste. This is the general category, but who are the people who've been left out? These are upper castes who've been left out. That again is an argument.
Well, yes, Neha, that was exactly the line of argument that Senior Advocate Shekhar Napade had also taken in the court hearing, because we saw the detailed arguments over 6.5 days before the Constitutional Bench just a few weeks ago, where all of these issues were carried out or were raised. And this is also an argument that has been considered by all the judges in their opinions as well. We just saw what Justice Bhatt had said about discriminatory provisions, and I will quote this, and I will quote what Justice Bhatt has said in his opinion, in his dissenting opinion, which he, has been which Justice Lalit and Justice Bhatt have given, that reservations on is this kind of exclusion discriminates the equality code that is there. Justice Bhatt has also very clearly in his opinion said that the Article 16.1 and 16.4, which is the affirmative action policies for SC, ST, OBCs, for women, those are facets of the same equality principles. We need these for equality of opportunity, and they cannot now be undermined to say that it allows exclusion on this very basis. And that this is what Justice Bhatt's argument for dissenting and saying that this is not something the EWS quota is wrong. That is what his line of opinion was, and this is exactly what Justice or what Senior Advocate Napade has argued in the courtroom and spoken to us today. Is the question of, if you are giving reservation to forward castes, to upper caste persons, then does it really conform to the principle of discrimination and equality that this entire question of reservation was based upon? And this is a question that has been asked also by politically inclined persons. We saw the kind of comments that have come out from certain political parties on this question of reservation as a policy for upliftment of backward castes and the historically backward, historically oppressed castes, versus reservation as a policy to help forward caste persons who also happen to be extremely poor. The government, of course, in its arguments, and the Supreme Court's other three judges, the three-judge majority opinion has said that affirmative action is something that is necessary to create a more egalitarian society. We saw the Attorney General and Solicitor General in their arguments also very clearly saying that this kind of reservation is required to ensure that persons who are extremely poor, who cannot access proper education or proper jobs, are given help in the country, so that this kind of discrimination on the basis of poverty does not continue. And here we are seeing all of these, and we've been discussing this for the last several minutes, Neha, that there are several nuances, several contours to this debate on reservation, on what it means for the caste system in the country, for the class system in this country, whether you are poor because you are poor, or whether you are poor because historically your ancestors were not allowed to make money, whether your poverty today is something that is creating a kind of discrimination for you today. Was it, or is it that poverty is a result of a historical wrong? All of these are contours of this debate. All of these are very, very crucial political questions that have been raised by political parties in this debate as well as the lawyers in this debate. But today what we are seeing from the Supreme Court, Sneha, is that by a 3:2 majority opinion, the EWS quota, the 10% forward reservation, has been upheld. Now this is also, and we've been talking about this when this matter was being heard. In the Jat reservation case, the court had said that the Jats may be economically backward and educationally backward, but they're certainly not socially backward because they have been in power. They are people who have political power as well as social power, and that is why at that point the Supreme Court had said that we cannot uphold this proposal, and even the government at the time had been on this question, had been considering this question of how exactly do you define poverty, how do you define deprivation.
Yes, just coming back to you, as expected, politics has erupted over the quota for poor or not. Congress Neta's shocking attack on the top court. Congress's Udit Raj calls top court casteist. Udit Raj has tweeted, Supreme Court is casteist. Still no doubt when it came to the economically weaker section reservation. How is it reversed that the 50% limit is not a constitutional obligation? But whenever it came to give reservation to the SC, ST, OBC, the 50% limit in the Indira Sahni case was cited, is what is being said by Dr. Udit Raj. I'm going to go across straight to Anisha on the nuances of the argument of the Indira Sahni verdict that the Congress leader who is now citing. Anisha.
Well, Sneha, the Indira Sahni judgment is the seminal verdict from the Supreme Court that had laid down the contours of the reservation policy as it has been followed till date. And I'm reiterating this for our viewers. This 50% quota and the fact that subsequent judgments from the Supreme Court had very clearly said that the government needs to get data. The government needs to get population figures, census figures to find out exactly who are the persons entitled to any kind of reservation, how many persons from each category that gets reservations is actually getting the benefit. How do you identify creamy layer? How exactly do you define somebody backward? That is something that Indira Sahni and its subsequent judgments have raised repeatedly as far as the reservation policy is concerned. And the Indira Sahni verdict was very clear that EWS, that reservation cannot exceed 50% of the total seats available. But here what the government has said is that we are not touching this 50% criteria. We are creating this EWS criteria as a separate vertical of reservations. Now, how this is going to work out, Sneha, is something that we'll have to wait and watch, because as I said, the observations that have been made in this verdict and the political war that is now erupting around this verdict and the 103rd Amendment is going to shape the reservation policy in the country for the next several years. Because remember, even for what we accept as reservation policy so far, which is the SC, ST, OBC quotas, particularly with regard to OBC quotas in the country, we have seen over the years and in the Supreme Court itself, the question coming up of how do you identify the relevant beneficiaries, how many of the categories of the beneficiaries are already getting the benefit. Can you say that X category or Y category is getting too much of the benefit while somebody else is being excluded from this category? So all of these are issues that have come up even in the implementation of the SC, ST, OBC reservation in the country as well. And I'm now being joined by Advocate Shadhan Farasat, who was appearing in court for one of the petitioners. Sir, how do you see this contour of this verdict, particularly? What does this mean for the reservation policy, and how do you see the states now implementing these policies?
See, one aspect is clear that the amendment has been upheld, so by a majority of 3:2. But I think there are very clearly divergent views of what is the meaning of reservation and equality in the Constitution between the 3 judges and the 2 judges. And that debate itself in other reservation matters. This is, of course, the EWS constitutional amendment has been upheld. And the exclusion has also been upheld by a majority. But that debate will continue in future reservation matters, and I think the dissent is a very strong dissent on the logic of the Constitution, on the logic of what is meant in the Constitution, what is the anti-discrimination principle.
If you could explain this for our viewers who do not understand legal principles here. The court, of course, by a 3-2 majority has upheld the amendment, but there are several observations involved that are questioning the extent of reservation, how long can reservations last, whether there should be some sort of a review of the methods of identification, etc. At the same time, there's a political war erupting over exclusion of OBCs and SC/STs and discrimination as such. So what does this really mean for a layperson?
See, so what has happened is there were two fundamental questions before the court. Question one was whether on economic criteria alone reservation can be granted in the Constitution. So on that, all the 5 judges are agreeing that yes, it can be granted on economic criteria alone. Then there was a second question, and the second question was whether the exclusion of the backward classes, that is SC, STs and OBCs from this EWS, in effect making it a forward class economic reservation, was that constitutional or did that violate basic structure? On the second question, 2 judges, Justice Bhatt speaking for himself and for the Chief Justice, have dissented and said that did violate the basic structure because it violates the anti-discrimination principle because they are the poorest. In fact, factually also the backward classes are the poorest. So even if you take economics as a sole criteria, why exclude the ones who are the most deserving? That's really the argument which we had. That was our argument, and that has been accepted by the 2 judges in toto. Now, the question whether how this will play out in other reservation matters, I think the dissent is a very strong dissent. It espouses a very egalitarian vision of the Constitution. So I think in other reservation matters, it's equally possible that the dissent will have more impact than the majority view today. But of course, as far as the amendment's constitutionality is there,
what about the issue of 50% ceiling limit as such? Because so far, every judgment, every verdict, every opinion has been you cannot cross that 50% limit. Now what happens?
So on the 50%, again, the majority has said that the 50% is not a rule of basic structure because that by itself, 50% by itself envisages exceptions. And if something envisages exceptions in the rule itself, then how can it be form of a basic structure? That's effectively the majority. Justice Bhatt seems to have, at least what he read out in court, seems to have expressed some reservation on that aspect, not a complete disagreement, but some reservation. So that exactly the extent of his reservation on that aspect we'll know when we read all the opinions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Farasat, for speaking to us. So, Sneha, we just heard from Advocate Shadan Farasat, who has been one of the counsels arguing in the court. He has been representing several of the petitioners as well. Back to you.
All right, important point that has been made as far as the 50% criteria is concerned, and this has already been raised politically, that why is that double speak, Anisha? Explain to us once again with Udit Raj, essentially, who belongs to the scheduled caste category, has said that how has this been reserved? That 50% limit is not a constitutional obligation. But whenever it came to giving reservations to the other categories, like the OBCs, STs and STs, this limit, 50%, was cited in the Indra Sawhney case.
Well, yes, Sneha, we are seeing this kind of politics being played out, this kind of questions that are being asked now, because this is something we just asked Mr. Farasat as well, that so far the 50% quota, 50% limit to reservations was seen almost as sacrosanct. Every kind of reservation, even OBC reservation when it was introduced, this argument was made that if there is a 50% limit, then you cannot cross it, which is why we have this split in the 50%, which is 25% and 27%. Quotas that have been given to the various categories. Now, what Udit Raj is saying, of course, is from the point of view of these oppressed backward classes, the historically oppressed classes of SC, ST, OBCs, who are questioning now that when we asked for higher quota, and remember this is an argument that had come up in a different case before the Supreme Court, where the Tamil Nadu Backward Class Reservation Act and the Karnataka judgment case had come up. There are several states in the country where the proportional population of OBCs or SC/STs versus the general population is a lot more than the general population. So those states had raised this question that when our proportional population is higher, then why can't we give, and I'm again going back to the Tamil Nadu example.
I'm just going to come back to you for more details on that, Nisha. We have a reaction that has come in. Let's go straight to that.
क्या तर्क रहे फैसला लेने
जिस तरीके से आज जो जजमेंट आया है, जो 103 अमेंडमेंट था उसको चैलेंज किया गया था, क्योंकि 103 अमेंडमेंट में ये एक्सक्लूड कर दिया था ओबीसी एससी एसटी को, तो ये वायलेट कर रहा था आर्टिकल 14 को, राइट टू इक्वलिटी को। इस इशू को लेके याचिका फाइल हुई थी कि आप आर्थिक आधार पर आरक्षण दीजिए, मगर जिस तरीके से एक्सक्लूजन हुआ है ये गलत हुआ है, जिसको माइनॉरिटी जो व्यू आया है चीफ जस्टिस और जस्टिस रविंद्र भट्ट का, उन्होंने इस चीज को माना है।
अब आप लोग इस फैसले को कैसे देखते हैं?
ये फैसला एक नए युग की शुरुआत कह सकते हैं कि जिस तरीके से ये 91 में इस तरीके का रिजर्वेशन दिया गया था, मगर 91 में जब ये इंदिरा साहनी का जजमेंट आया तो ये माना 9 जजेस ने कि जिस तरीके से आर्थिक आधार अगर आप रिजर्वेशन का लेते हैं तो ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल फ्रॉड है। उस इशू को उसके बाद में कभी फिर इसके बाद गुजरात में एक बार जरूर दिया गया था 10% रिजर्वेशन थ्रू नोटिफिकेशन, मगर वो भी हाई कोर्ट ने स्टक डाउन कर दिया था। उसके बाद में एसएलपी यहाँ पेंडिंग थी। इलेक्शन के पहले आनंद फानन में 10% आर्थिक आधार पर आरक्षण दिया गया, जिसको आज यहाँ पे मेजोरिटी व्यू है जस्टिस महेश्वरी के साथ में जस्टिस बेला त्रिवेदी एंड जस्टिस पारदीवाला, इनके व्यू ने अपहेल्ड किया है कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन अमेंडमेंट को।
क्या आप कोई रिव्यू वगैरह का भी
हमारे क्लाइंट का अभी कहना है, अब लीगल वो एडवाइस लेंगे। बाकी जो हमारा जो व्यू था, जिस बेसिस पे हम लोगों ने पिटीशन फाइल की थी, वो माइनॉरिटी जजमेंट में बिल्कुल झलक रहा है और इसमें अच्छी संभावना बनती है कि इसमें रिव्यू फाइल की जाए।
शुक्रिया।
ओके।
All right, big story. Anisha, in fact, is with us. Anisha, we'll just come back to you in a moment from now, but the petitioners, lawyers just said that a review is something that we're looking at very closely. And also on the phone line, we're being joined right now, if I could get that name once again, from Desh Ratan Nigam is now joining us. What do you think of the judgment of the court today? Of course, it's a 3:2 verdict upholding 10% reservation for the economically weaker sections, with a certain section of the political class already saying that this is in violation.
No, Sneha, certainly not. In fact, this reservation does not even breach the ceiling laid down in Indira Sahni's case of 50% reservation. That was for socially and educationally backward classes. This is for economically weaker sections, which has been carved out from the remaining 50%, which is an unreserved quota, and therefore it cannot be doubted. In 50% ceiling is not the basic structure of the constitution, because that has been carved out by the Supreme Court through a judgment. So it was not even mentioned in the constitution. And secondly,
no, the Indira Sahni matter essentially is incorrect, is what you're saying.
No, what I am saying, it was for the socially and educationally backward classes. Okay. So that would not apply in this case, because this was for, here the criteria is economic. So there is a difference between the two. So that judgment will not apply in this particular case. And therefore 3:2 majority is upholding it is perfectly all right. And secondly, this is a reasonable classification. And the governments have the power to do a reasonable classification. So it is not violative of any of the principles, and therefore this was done through an amendment of the constitution. Earlier, Maratha reservation was attempted, some other reservation was attempted, but then there was no constitutional amendment, and therefore they were struck down earlier. So this was done. First, the constitutional amendment was brought in, and then the reservation, 10% executive decision was taken to grant 10% reservation to EWS category. So this stands on an absolutely different footing, and therefore the poorer sections of the remaining 50% will get the benefit. They have not done any harm to anybody, and therefore they do require such kind of affirmative action. And the judgments, the 3 judges who are in favor, who have upheld the constitutional validity, have also held that the equality is among equals, not among unequals, and therefore they have said this the deprived section, the 10% deprived section of the economically weaker section, should get the reservation. In my opinion, it's
okay.
a very good
Be with us, Mr. Desh Ratan Nigam. I'll just come back to you in a moment from now. SP Singh Baghel, The Minister of State in the Ministry of Law is now joining us. शुक्रिया इंडिया टुडे के साथ बात करने के लिए। आप कैसे देखते हैं इस वर्डिक्ट को? सरकार, गवर्नमेंट का स्टैंड ये रहा है कि ये इम्प्लीमेंट होना चाहिए, कोर्ट को इस पे ग्रीन सिग्नल देना चाहिए। इन दैट सेंस एक विक्ट्री है ये सरकार के लिए आज सुप्रीम कोर्ट की तरफ से।
जी, मैं माननीय सर्वोच्च न्यायालय के इस बहुत ही ऐतिहासिक और महत्वपूर्ण निर्णय का स्वागत करता हूं और अभिनंदन करता हूं। माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने 2020 में EWS जो सवर्ण समाज में आर्थिक रूप से पिछड़े लोग हैं उनके लिए 10% का आरक्षण किया था, जिसमें शर्त लगाई थी कि 100 वर्ग फुट से ज्यादा उनका आवास नहीं होना चाहिए और 1000 वर्ग फुट से ऊपर का फ्लैट नहीं होना चाहिए, 5 एकड़ से ऊपर जमीन नहीं होनी चाहिए और 8 लाख रुपए से ज्यादा उनकी आर्थिक स्थिति नहीं होनी चाहिए। ऐसे लोगों को 10% आरक्षण दिया गया था और जिसमें संविधान में संशोधन करना पड़ा। इसके खिलाफ कुछ लोग माननीय सुप्रीम कोर्ट गए और सुप्रीम कोर्ट की संविधान पीठ में ये महत्वपूर्ण, बल्कि मैं ये कहना चाहूंगा कि यू ललित साहब जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट के मुख्य न्यायाधीश हैं, कल सेवानिवृत्त हो रहे हैं और मैं जाते हुए उन्होंने एक महत्वपूर्ण फैसला किया है जिसको लोग याद रखेंगे और 3 लोगों ने इसके पक्ष में और 2 लोगों ने इसके खिलाफ किया है। तो ये कोई भी व्यक्ति जन्म का अधिकार उसके हाथ में नहीं होता है कि वो वाल्मीकि के समाज घर में पैदा हो या ब्राह्मण के घर में पैदा हो। तो ये गरीबी जो है पाप नहीं है, ये एक अभिशाप है। तो ऐसे में माननीय प्रधानमंत्री ने पंडित दीनदयाल उपाध्याय के अंत्योदय को आरक्षण में लागू किया है। 10% आरक्षण EWS का जो सवर्ण समाज के लोग होते हैं और मैं उसका स्वागत और अभिनंदन करता हूँ। और खास और ऐसे समय जो लोग प्रतिकूल टिप्पणियां माननीय सुप्रीम कोर्ट पर करते हैं वो डेमोक्रेसी को कहीं ना कहीं कमजोर कर रहे हैं, जिनका डेमोक्रेसी में विश्वास है, जिनका डेमोक्रेसी में विश्वास नहीं है।
जी, पूछना चाहूंगी बघेल साहब, इस समय कोर्ट में ये भी बोला गया है, जैसे जस्टिस पारदीवाला ने कहा है कि ये तो केवल 10 साल के लिए था, कि एक कैविएट है। BR अम्बेडकर ने एनविसाज किया था कि रिजर्वेशन जो है वो लिमिटेड पीरियड के लिए होना चाहिए, लेकिन हमारे देश में जो हमने देखा है कि रिजर्वेशन बढ़ता ही गया है, परसेंटेज बढ़ता ही गया है और टाइम भी बहुत ज़्यादा लैप्स हो गया, लेकिन रिजर्वेशंस कंटिन्यू हैं। ऐसे में सरकार का क्या मानना है ये रिजर्वेशन को लेके, इकोनॉमिकली वीकर सेक्शंस के रिजर्वेशन को लेके?
सरकार जब महसूस करती है कि शैक्षिक और सामाजिक रूप से जो लोग पिछड़े हैं और अब तो आर्थिक पक्ष भी उसमें आ गया है और जो पिछड़े हैं, जो आज़ादी के 75 साल में ही अभी अपनी बड़ी आबादी के बाद भी कई ऐसे परिवार हैं जो शेड्यूल कास्ट के 75 साल देश की आज़ादी हो गए और संविधान को लागू हुए भी जो है 72 साल हो गए हैं, लेकिन अभी उनके घर में एक चतुर्थ श्रेणी कर्मचारी भी नियुक्त नहीं हुआ। इसी प्रकार से अति पिछड़ों में भी देख रहा हूँ, कुछ के लड़के हैं वो सभी लोग नौकरी पा जाते हैं, उसमें अभी एक भी व्यक्ति कंडक्टर, ड्राइवर या क्लीनर या 4th क्लास भी नहीं बन पाता है। हालांकि ये निर्भर करता है कि जो रिजर्वेशन में नौकरी पाए हैं और जो रिजर्वेशन में नहीं पाए हैं उनमें एक लाइन का अंतर है शिक्षा के स्तर का। तो जिस दिन हमारे देश की शिक्षा अगर समान शिक्षा ये रही होती आजादी के साथ ही, कॉमन एजुकेशन होती, कि राष्ट्रपति भवन में श्री राजेंद्र प्रसाद जी प्रथम राष्ट्रपति जी का ग्रैंडसन, राष्ट्रपति भवन के चपरासी का लड़का, दिल्ली के कमिश्नर का और सिपाही का लड़का और नगर सेठ का और अधिकारी का लड़का और प्रधानमंत्री का और मंत्री का लड़का जो एक ही कमरे में एक ही छत के नीचे अगर कॉमन एजुकेशन ले रहे होते तो मुझे लगता है कि फिर बहुत लंबे समय तक इसकी आवश्यकता नहीं पड़ती। अब हमारे यहाँ आप ये देखो कि शिक्षा के भी कई स्तर हैं। देहरादून का दून स्कूल, अजमेर का मेयो कॉलेज, ग्वालियर का सिंधिया और नैनीताल का शेरपुर, ये पहला स्टैंडर्ड होता है। फिर टीचर्स प्रत्येक 4 चीटी जो इनका DPS टाइप के दूसरे स्टैंडर्ड होते हैं और उनसे नीचे अंग्रेजी नाम रख करके पढ़ाते हैं वो होते हैं। फिर 4था स्टैंडर्ड होता है जो गाँव देहात में विद्यालय होते हैं। तो 4थे प्रकार के एजुकेशन लेकर के पहले प्रकार के बच्चों से कंपटीशन में आना बहुत कठिन है। 10 साल के लिए होता है, रिव्यू करते हैं, तो देखते हैं अभी अगर और आवश्यकता है। और घर में भी माँ भी जो बच्चा शारीरिक रूप से कमजोर होता है उसको दूध और दवा की व्यवस्था पेरेंट्स भी करते हैं।
जी बघेल साहब, ये भी पूछना चाहूंगी मैं आपसे,
करती हैं कि अभी बढ़ाने की आवश्यकता है तो बढ़ाती हैं।
पूछना चाहूंगी आपसे, अभी हमने लॉयर्स से बातचीत की, जो पिटिशनर के लॉयर हैं वो कह रहे हैं कि ये ऐसे कैटेगरी को बेनिफिट करेगा क्योंकि ये जनरल कैटेगरी के लोगों को रिजर्वेशन देगा। ये ऐसे कैटेगरी के लोगों को बेनिफिट करेगा जिन्हें हिस्टोरिकली रिजर्वेशन की कोई ज़रूरत ही नहीं है, कास्ट से इसे जोड़ा गया है। क्या बोलेंगे आप इस आर्ग्यूमेंट को, क्योंकि वो कह रहे हैं कि वो एक रिव्यू पिटिशन भी फाइल करेंगे। जी,
किनका आर्गुमेंट है? किसका आर्गुमेंट है?
जो पिटिशनर्स के जो लॉयर्स हैं जिन्होंने रिजर्वेशन को अपोज किया था।
ओके
जी
हाँ जी नहीं, मैंने फिर अपनी बात की भी पुनरावृत्ति करना चाहूंगा। ये माननीय वकील साहब जो खुद कह रहे हैं, ये किसी सवर्ण समाज में पैदा होते और जो महागरीब परिवार होता, क्योंकि जन्म पर किसी का अधिकार नहीं है, वो चॉइस नहीं है कि हम पैसे वाले घरों में ही पैदा होते। और ये जब दोयम दर्जे की शिक्षा लेते, दोयम दर्जे की चिकित्सा होती, दोयम दर्जे का भोजन उनको मिलता, तब इस प्रकार की बातें इनके, तब मैं समझता कि तब कहते तो कोई बात सही है। मुंशी प्रेमचंद की पूछ की रात एक कहानी है, उसको डल्लभ किलों पर सोने वाले और एसी में रहने वाले याद करके 90% नंबर ला सकते हैं। उसके दर्द और मर्म को वही समझ सकता है जिसने पूछ की ठंडी रात एक सागर में काटी हो। तो ऐसे सवर्ण समाज के तमाम उन गरीब बच्चों से पूछेगा कि उनकी शिक्षा, दीक्षा, चिकित्सा और आवास किस प्रकार से गरीबी में गुजरा है, जिससे वो क्वालिटी एजुकेशन भी नहीं ले पाए हैं।
जी, अब भी पूछना चाहूंगी आपसे कि इस ऑर्डर का, आज इस वर्डिक्ट का एग्जिस्टिंग रिजर्वेशंस पर क्या इम्पैक्ट होगा? ऑनगोइंग केसेस हैं ओबीसी रिजर्वेशन पे और डीलेज इन इम्प्लीमेंटिंग रिजर्वेशन, ये भी मामला आया है, इस पर क्या इम्पैक्ट रहेगा?
ओबीसी का आरक्षण आप देख ही रहे हैं कि 27% का। मैं प्रधानमंत्री जी का धन्यवाद देना चाहूंगा कि गत वर्ष उन्होंने इसको एमबीबीएस में, पीजी में, यूजी में और पीजी में और सेंट्रल स्कूल्स में, नवोदय में, कस्तूरबा में, इनमें भी आरक्षण करते हैं। अक्सर राज्यों में मैं देखता हूँ कि बहुत से राज्य इसमें जिसमें 50% ओबीसी अपने आप में उनकी आबादी रहती है। डॉक्टर लोहिया जो खुद सवर्ण थे, लेकिन उन्होंने 60 के दशक में नारा दिया था कि संसोपा ने बांधी गांठ, पिछड़े काम में 100 में 60, तो वो तो 60% के आरक्षण की बात करते हैं। लेकिन मंडल कमीशन ने इसको 27% लागू किया है और हमारे एससी का 15% है, 7.5% एसटीज का है और 10% ईडब्ल्यूएस का है। इसमें दिव्यांग और भूतपूर्व सैनिकों का है। तो कुल मिलाकर संविधान की मूल आत्मा है, उस पर कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा।
जी, ये भी पूछना चाहूंगी कि आइडेंटिफिकेशन कैसे होगा ये इकोनॉमिकली वीकर सेक्शंस का, और ये कितने सालों तक सर रिजर्वेशन देंगे? आप इसे रिव्यू कब करेंगे?
इस समय हम वर्तमान में सरकार माननीय नरेंद्र मोदी जी चला रहे हैं और वो पंडित दीनदयाल उपाध्याय ने जो कहा था, अंत्योदय आखिरी व्यक्ति के चेहरे पर मुस्कान आए। माननीय नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने अंतिम सवर्ण व्यक्ति जो अंतिम पायदान पर खड़ा है, जो 70-72 साल से कृषि भवन, रक्षा भवन, नॉर्थ ब्लॉक, साउथ ब्लॉकों में नहीं आता था, उनके लिए भी 10% ईडब्ल्यूएस का आरक्षण करके लाल कार्पेट बिछाने का काम किया। और बहुत खुशी की बात यह है कि प्रधानमंत्री जी ने केंद्र सरकार की समस्त नौकरियों में जो ग्रुप ए, ग्रुप बी, ग्रुप सी और डी में होता है, इंटरव्यू केवल ग्रुप ए में होगा, ग्रुप बी के गजेटेड अधिकारियों का होगा, ग्रुप बी के नॉन गजेटेड अधिकारियों का इंटरव्यू नहीं होगा और सी और डी में नहीं होगा। सी में बहुत बड़े पद होते हैं रेलवे के और सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट के। मैं इसलिए इंटरव्यू समाप्त करने का महिमामंडन कर रहा हूँ कि अक्सर पूर्ववर्ती सरकारों में इंटरव्यू लेने के लिए नहीं होते थे, सब कुछ तय होता था, इंटरव्यू निकालने के लिए होते थे। लेना है तो आगरा की स्पेलिंग बता दो, नहीं लेना है तो चेकोस्लोवाकिया की बताओ। और चेकोस्लोवाकिया की स्पेलिंग बता के भी लोगों को इसलिए नौकरी लगती थी कि वो बंदरबाट हो जाती थी। ऐसा अपने उत्तर प्रदेश में अखिलेश जी, मुलायम सिंह जी की सरकार में और बहन की सरकार में देखा होगा, केंद्र में भी इसी प्रकार से हुआ होता था। आजादी के बाद अगर मेरे से पूछा जाए कि कौन सा बड़ा।
बघेल साहब, शुक्रिया हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए। You heard from the MOS law and we are going straight across to Congress leader Udit Raj speaking to India Today.
Saying that 50% limit cannot be exceeded, how could it be exceeded? Again, I am reiterating that EWS, I am in support of EWS, I am not opposing it. However, the mindset is getting reflected in the judgment.